today's portion is Behar and Bechukokai. You guys all know when it's a leap year, we have one Torah portion per week. When it's not a leap year, as now, we squash them together. So today's two are squashed, Behar and Bechukokai. Behar starts at Leviticus 25 and goes a little past the end of 25. It goes to 26:2, and Bechukotai starts at 26:3 and goes to the end of Leviticus. And Michael will joyfully, we will do Hazak. Behar starts on 25:1. It brings in the concept of Shemitah, which is a rest for the land, and it explains. Moses tells Israel that you will plant the land for 6 years, and in the 7th year, the land gets a Shabbat. It gets a break. Don't plant. And the first place this was ever talked about back in Exodus, it in fact puts Shabbat right next to Shemitah. The land gets a Shabbat, you get it, and you get a Shabbat. The land deserves it. Then it introduces right after that the concept of the Yovel. The Shemitah is the 7th year. The Yovel is for 7 periods of 7 years. We do Shemitah. And on the year after that, starting on Yom Kippur, we have Yuval. We declare the Jubilee for a year. And you will the description in the back with a little more detail about all property versus tribal owners, and all debts are canceled, and also I saw it. I'd seen it many years ago. That's what's on a verse regarding the Yuval is what's on the Liberty Bell in the United States. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. Then it switches and gives detail. It gives detail on the Shemitah and detail on the Yuval. And the detail on the Shemitah is a surprising one. It says, the act of Shemitah, not planting on the 7th year, it's not a hardship. It's not an act of faith. It doesn't need any of those things. God says, if you're keeping my chukim, one of Rabbi Berg's favorite words, all the time, when you hit year 6, the land will take care of you. You plant 5 years, in the 6th year, it's going to yield so much, it's going to be spilling out of your barns and your silos, and you're not going to know what to do with it. You will not have to get down on your knees and intercede all through the 7th year for food. You're going to have so much in the 6th, it's going to go all the way through the 6th year, all the way through the 7th year, and when you plant for the 8th year and you're waiting for the harvest, it'll feed you then too, and you'll have extra. Let your neighbor's animals come and eat it off the ground because you're not going to know what to do with it. I will give it ahead. So this is not something where you got to walk out in faith and struggle and have pain and confusion and wait. It's delivered up front. Then it gives detail on Yovel, on the Jubilee, and describes in a bunch of verses here the details for how to redeem possessions, then houses and property, then the Levitical cities, and then persons, and prior to the Jubilee year. And then it ends, that chapter ends with not what, but why you should redeem your brothers and sisters. And God's explanation is very simple. They're mine. The children of Israel are mine. They cannot be slaves to you, to anybody else, to Gentiles, to nobody. They're mine. And it has a good bit of detail there about you cannot not allow them to become the slaves of a pagan so that they become the servants of idols. And it doesn't mean spiritually there. It's really talking about physically. Because if you had to sell yourself to labor to someone who's not a Jew, and they happen to be, the groundskeeper or the chief priest of the neighborhood temple of Baal or Moloch or whatever, guess what you're going to be doing? You may be mopping floors in the pagan temple. And God, absolutely not allowed. Buy them back. Do whatever you have to do. Even if you don't like them, fear me and go get them back. It's an interesting verse. And it ends with, and I'm going to read that verse, and I'm going to read 2 verses that are at the end of 26. That says, related to that, while we're speaking of pagan temples, do not make statues, do not make markers to prostrate yourselves, don't make images and so on, because they don't do anything that looks like what the pagans do. Then Bechukokai is related. That's the next portion. It talks. I think Barry last week, and I've heard Michael, I've heard Rabbi David say we can partition the commandments all kinds of ways. One is to talk about the adat, the mitzvot, the mishpatim, the chukim, and so on. That's one way. This portion splits them in two halves. The ones we understand and the ones we don't. The ones called, that's simple, right? Mishpatim, mitzvot. They make sense. Don't kill, don't steal, don't covet, don't lie in court, because society will fall apart if you do. So don't do that. The other ones don't make any sense. Things like the red ashes of a red heifer. Don't mix fibers in your clothes. Cord of blue. Don't plant the land in the 7th year. Those make no sense whatsoever. Those are the hukim. But this portion actually explains why they exist. It says, if you do those, and you don't make a difference between the ones you like and they make sense and the ones that don't make sense, and you keep them, then your threshing will last to vintage, your vintage till the sowing, your bread to fullness, you'll have peace. The wild beasts on the land will back off. The ones that are trying to come in won't come near you. You'll put 1,000 enemies to flee, and so on. And then at the end, last lines of it, in verse 15, it starts to describe what happens if you don't take the chukot. It doesn't specify. You can keep the ones that make sense and ignore the ones that don't. It says if you don't keep them, any of them, here's the curses. And there's something like 25 verses, 30 sentences. It's not because there's more curses than blessings. It's not that. God is very gentle and he rolls them out very slow. He's not in the business of wanting to smack and punish us instantly. He gives us pieces as instruction, and if the instruction doesn't work, then the next thing will fall. And then it finishes. That's why this one is often blended with Bahar, because the last lines in here are the instructions of how to, if you're going to buy back a human from a vow, not as a slave, but from a vow, or a korban. If you're going to buy back an animal from a korban, if you're going to buy back a home or field or property from a korban. Those are the rest of the lines. And it accepts one kind. Verse 29 in Leviticus 27 says, if a person's been condemned, banned from the community, banned from mankind, and cannot be redeemed, he has to be put to death. When you have time, go put that line next to Isaiah 53:4. You'll see what you see. You'll see some things. And the last lines are Tu B'Shavat, the tithing of trees and seeds, and the final last line is the tithing of cattle. We're all Messianic here, so we probably already know Judaism has 4 New Years, right? We know first Tishrei, first Nisan. These are the other 2. The 15th of Shavat, the tithing of trees, and the month of the tithing of the cattle. So that's our 4. I wanted to go show you something that the Sephardic rabbis, Rabbi Sforno, wrote about that really blessed me. We know natural law, right, about planting. My trainer, Adam, he said I could say his name today. His family owns a big farm in eastern Colorado. And so the Lingos and the Rosenbergs that run that big farm out there, they know about rotating crops, giving the field the rest, fertilizing, and so on. They know that you cannot just plant the same thing on the same piece of dirt every year for a long time. You're going to kill the soil. And he's the one, when I go to Shachrit and I take wheat stalks with me over to the gym, the person, he starts eating them while I'm heaving barbells or whatever. He's a farm boy. Jewish farm boy, Rosenberg farm boy, Sicilian farm boy, but he's a farm boy. And he knows flat out, you can't do this. But Rabbi Sforno says in Israel, the land is different. The land does not obey natural law. It obeys a different law. And the law is that the primary force that drives things there isn't nature, it's God. And God's word about this place is obey the chukim. I get to pour out the blessing. And what will happen is every single year you plant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it feeds you. And by the 6th year, when every other piece of dirt on earth would be exhausted and can't feed you, it produces 3 times as much. That's my rules. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it doesn't die, it gets better. For 1 year, 3 times. And then the land goes on vacation, and so do you, for 1 year, 7th year. And what are you supposed to do in that vacation? It even says it. Go read Leviticus 26. What do? It says, I'll get out of the tabernacle. I'll park it, I'll get out, and I'll walk with you. And we were joking yesterday. God says he'll park the ark and get out and walk. And I was on the push-up bench when I was telling that to Anna. We were laughing, and he's going, don't drop that dumbbell on my foot. that's familiar. What Rabbi Sforno said is, we had this once before. You kind of remember once we had a time when we only had one commandment, and it didn't make any sense. You can eat all those trees, don't eat that one. You can eat all, why not? It looks just like those. Why can't we eat that? It doesn't make any sense. We had one of those. And God spoke a blessing, and the garden produced with no work. And what do we do with our time off? God came to walk with us, and the cool of the day, it says. We were laughing about that yesterday too, because it says he waited for the breeze. He came in the ruach of the day. He waited for the breeze. We had this once before. So what Rabbi Sforno says is, you know what? If we had walked, if we had done what God said, if we had walked and just obeyed, we would have had 1 year every 7 years. The land of Israel would be the Garden of Eden for 1 year. Every 7 years. Didn't happen, right? We didn't obey. From day one got in the land, we were engaged with all the foreign gods that we should have. So we didn't have 1 year every 7 years. So everybody else on the earth would want to come to the So we get another chance. Well, 1,300 years later, country, we're in Israel. Yeshua did very similar things. He was frequently going around giving pukim. He was telling people to do stuff that made no sense, or even more so, impossible. And then he would define natural law. He did it all the time. So I only picked a few. We won't go through them. We won't study them. You go look at the situation, the man with the withered hand, right? Yeshua says to the man, get up and come over here. Which was easy. He wasn't crippled. Come over here. Next thing, you're fine. Well, good. Open your hand. Well, you know, it says his hand was withered, shriveled, atrophy, whatever. Can't do that. Excuse me, shriveled doesn't open. He didn't say that. He just did it. He didn't have time to think. He just obeyed. What it was not faith, it was obedience. Move where, what you can look another one, where it says, Yeshua gave the man things, he was on the pallet. And like said, good things, and he responds, oh, I can prove that I have the power to forgive you. You laying in the bed, get up. And while you're at it, pick that thing up and get it out of here. It's not clean, pick it up. The man's still laying in the bed. He wasn't healed yet. It doesn't say, oh, he was healed, and then he was instructed what to do. Guy's laying crippled, Yeshua says, get up and take that thing. Blind man. Michael and I have been very different. Yeshua tells a blind man, go down Hezekiah's tunnel and go wash in the pool of Shiloah. Blind, never seen it, sorry, don't even know what it is. But he did it. He didn't have time to think, he just did it. And Yeshua defied the natural order. But there's one I want us to think about. This is the last one. The people who were with him, believers, his disciples, they knew him, they'd seen the miracles, they walked with him. They're spiritual, his disciples. He did the same thing to them. He told them, go do something you can't do. 5,000 people, 5,000 men, other people hungry. So they come to Yeshua and go, please send them away so they can go find some food or something. And go read the Gospels carefully. Yeshua said, don't send them away. You feed them. And their immediate response to spiritual ones, us, Messianic believers, we walk in knowledge. We know how to say Yeshua. We know to say Tevilah and Mikvah and not baptism. We're the spiritual ones. That's who he's talking to. They go, not enough money, not enough time, not enough food. Even if we spend everything we have, maybe a little food. Nobody gets to eat. So Yeshua dealt with it himself, because he loved that crowd enough to feed them anyway. So I just wanted to tell you, yeah, it's important. We need to be messianic. We need to be different because we're messianic. Absolutely. But what we really got to be is if Yeshua says, take that piece of bread and keep splitting it. And don't stop because it won't. And you can just cut that thing 5,000 times. It's not going to stop. And there'll still be leftovers. You got to have that too. Yeah, spiritual is good, etc. Messianism is important. Our role is important. But we're missing something. And I personally would like to be able to break a piece of bread 5,000 times and watch people get fed. There are times in my life God has told me, go tell that person that he's going to or his sister, that he's going to outlive his sickle cell disease. And by the point he told me to do that, the man was no longer African American color, the rich, beautiful brown. He was gray. He was end stage, real anemic. And God had to bring those people to me 3 and 4 and 5 times on 16th Street Mall. Go tell her what I told you to tell her. And eventually I obeyed him. I got there. And because in other times when God said, go say this, go tell that woman her granddaughter's not going to die, go tell this, go tell your co-worker that the baby with the crushed brain is going to make it and he's not going to be brain injured. When you obey, God shows up in London or wherever else this situation and fixes it. So I don't need to see the man that had gray skin whose disease was end-stage chemo. God said say it, and then it's not my problem. God's the healer, not me. So the next time you have an opportunity, when Yeshua says, you feed him. And he puts the bread in your hands and says, break, keep going. Do it.